Hey everyone, Sweeney here, and welcome to another episode of the TriggerCast. I'm here today with Ryan Levesque, who actually lives in Austin, Texas, which I just came back from. But more importantly, he is the inventor and creator of the survey funnel formula. I believe, is that its exact title?
That's the exact title, my man. You nailed it.
I got it. So this is his tagline is that he's probably converted more customers and generated more leads than almost anybody online using this method. Now, you want some hard numbers? 2.8 million leads, 175,000 customers in 17 different markets. If that's not impressive, I don't know what is. Thank you a lot for coming on today.
Sweeney, I'm happy to be here, man. I'm really thrilled to be with you and to share what we're doing with your audience.
So, I mean, I throw around some of these crazy numbers. I think a lot of our listeners, most people aren't at this level.
Right.
And you have a story about, kind of your 0 to 18 month story, really how you got started.
So what happens is whenever I bring up these numbers, 2.8 million leads, 175,000 customers, you're absolutely right. People hear those numbers and they think, well, I'm nowhere near that size of my business. How does this relate to me? Well, what's interesting and I think is more relevant is really the story of how this methodology came about. So I got into this world of internet marketing like most people. It wasn't something that I grew up and thought I was going to do. I have a corporate background. I worked on Wall Street for the investment bank Goldman Sachs. I worked for the insurance company AIG. And I was living in China, and I was running a sales office expansion project, flying around the country, tethered to the BlackBerry, living out of hotels. I was based in Shanghai. My wife, who's also American, was doing graduate school in Hong Kong at the University of Hong Kong, and we're living this crazy bi-country marriage, and I burnt out. Like at 25 years old, I was basically burnt out. And I said there has to be something else. I want to go into business for myself, but I don't know what I want to do. So I turned to online marketing because I had a few buddies of mine in the States who were making some money. And at first, I failed. Like most people, I tried a whole bunch of stuff. I invested in some stupid programs. I had stuff shipped to me in China. And eventually I stumbled upon a gentleman by the name of Dr. Glenn Livingston. And Dr. Glenn Livingston is someone who is a PhD marketing psychologist, and he had this methodology that he used to get into different markets that involved using surveys. And immediately I gravitated to his model because he was getting into all these tiny little niche markets like guinea pig care, pygmy goat care, radon detection. And so I immediately latched on to him and decided he is doing something that nobody else is doing. So I invested in his $2,000 product, had it shipped to me in China, used his methodology, and long story short, I was able to make my first money online. And it was in a tiny little niche, teaching people how to make jewelry in a very specific space using Scrabble tiles, the most random of things. And for me, it was not something I had any interest in at all. It was just a niche that my wife had stumbled on because she was telling me about this crazy, fad that was happening, and we capitalized on it. Well, that led me to appreciate the value of using surveys in a very specific way. So using that methodology as the sort of the groundwork, it evolved into what I do today. And after that first small success, which was kind of what I consider to be a quote-unquote practice business, my first business online, we took from nothing to $25,000 a month within 18 months, and this was back in 2008. And then I replicated the process in 3 different markets, like I said, jewelry making, a gardening market, and then memory improvement. And after having 3 successes in 3 markets outside the how to make money space, I started telling people about this methodology that I was using, which is now known as the survey funnel formula method. And eventually I was at a mastermind and I had someone say, hey Ryan, your methodology is brilliant. What if I just handed you a big pile of money? Would you be willing to do this for my business? And that's what I've been doing all day, every day for the last basically 5 years. And I'm now in, publicly say 17 markets. I'm actually in 23 markets at the time of this interview. And I've implemented this now in markets ranging from golf instruction to business funding, tennis instruction, dog training, weight loss supplements, fitness instruction, I could beekeeping. I mean, the list goes on.
Beekeeping, that's
it's
great.
a whole bunch of different markets, And earlier this year, for the first time ever, I came out of the shadows. I'm not someone who's quote unquote in the IM world, but I came out of the shadows, and at the urging of a friend, on a whim, did a webinar teaching my methodology. It was part of a telesummit series, and I had no idea what to expect. I wasn't sure if anybody was going to buy the training that I had put out. It was not only the best-selling training in this particular telesummit series, but we outsold the next most popular training 2-to-1. I think we put 350 people into the training, and it was the most popular by far. And that's when I realized that this is something that people can use, whether you're starting out from ground zero like I was back in 2008, or if you're a large established business and you want to take your business to the next level. So that's the 2-minute story in a nutshell, and I'm happy to talk about whatever we think is going to be most helpful.
So, I mean, it sounds like you're definitely an expert at a few different things. Kind of me reading up a little bit on you and researching on you, I mean, 3 questions immediately are, kind of come to mind. So it's, what's the kind of science behind the, survey funnel formula? And
Sure.
Ideally in maybe an applicable way of like, hey, this is what works in this. You might find that this is why people do this on all opt-in pages, or this is why people do this in campaigns.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the science for a moment. So what's interesting is my academic background is in neuroscience and Chinese studies. And when I say neuroscience, I'm not, this isn't NLP or some certification. I actually have an Ivy League degree in neuroscience and East Asian studies from Brown University. So I studied and actually taught 2 years of Neuro 101 at Brown. And so I have a legitimate academic background in neuroscience. And so a lot of my marketing is based on the psychology and neuroscience of consumer behavior. So I bring that up because it's important to what I'm going to mention next, which is your question, well, what's the science behind using surveys in a very specific way in your marketing? Well, I'll talk about 2 different things. The first thing is relatively obvious. It's that in a world where so many businesses build their funnels around a one-size-fits-all offer, so in other words, hey, we're the absolute best at X, Y, Z, the secret to standing out is to zig when everybody else is zagging. And the way that I've zigged in my marketing and basically what I teach is in a world where everybody's on their tippy toes, figuratively speaking, on their tippy toes, screaming at the top of their lungs, saying, look at me, I'm the best, look at me. What I'm doing effectively with surveys is saying, time out. To be perfectly honest, I don't know if I can help you, but I do know this. If you take the time to answer a few simple questions about where you are right now, what you're struggling with, what your challenges are, using that information, I can put you in touch with the best match solution for you. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now that might sound very obvious, but very few businesses do that, and even fewer businesses execute on that effectively. So that's the first major premise behind why this methodology is so successful and why it works in market after market after market. The premise of, well, everybody else offers a one-size-fits-all solution. I'm offering you a customized, tailored solution that's universally applicable. So that's the first thing. Now, on the more science end of it is something that I like to talk about that I call micro commitments. Okay, and I talk about the science of micro commitments. So again, if you look at what everybody else is doing online and through the theme of zigging where everybody else is zagging, what's the most common first point in a marketing funnel? So, Sweeney, if you were to just, throw something out, what do most people say the first step is in a marketing funnel after someone clicks on your ad, they reach a landing page, and what happens next?
The landing page is most likely going to offer them something in return for their email address.
Right. Squeeze page, right?
Yeah.
Lead capture, right? Well, there's a problem with that. See, asking someone for their name and email, or even just their email, as the first point of contact elicits a threat response in your prospect's brain. It's literally been scientifically proven that it fires off an area of your limbic system called the amygdala. It's a structure in your brain. It fires off the same area. It elicits a response in the same area of your brain responsible for the fight or flight response. So what you're doing when you're asking someone for their email address too early in a relationship, You're literally scaring your prospects. You're eliciting that fight or flight response. So the question is, what's the alternative? What's the secret? Well, the reason why it elicits that response is because you're asking your prospects to take a step that's too big, it's threatening. On the extreme, it would be like, imagine if I met you for the first time on the street, Sweeney, and I said, hey, dude, what's your social security number?
No, it makes sense. A lot of times when you hear them talk about, dating advice, you listen to anyone dating advice, they say it's silly and it's stupid, but number one, you have to make sure that you don't pose a threat, that you don't freak them out. And I mean, it's funny because you hear it in something like this, and what is everyone doing? Step one is posing a threat.
Right, because what's happening, and your prospects aren't going through this conscious process in their mind. They're not saying, man, I'm threatened by this. But what's happening at an unconscious level, all this processing is going on. They're thinking, is this guy going to spam the hell out of my inbox? Is this guy going to steal my contact information? I don't want to be bombarded with a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to throw in a fake email address. You know what? I don't want to commit to this. I don't even know if I know this guy, right? All of those thoughts are happening at an unconscious level in microseconds. And what's the fight or flight response manifestation of that online? Bounce. People bounce off your site. Bounce rate, right? They flee. That's the flight part of the fight or flight response. So the question is, what's the antidote? This gets down to the science. What's the antidote? The antidote is hacking that fight or flight response, hacking the limbic system. And the way you hack a person's limbic system, just like in dating, that's a perfect analogy, I'm glad you brought that up, is you reduce the size of the step you're asking someone to take. So instead of asking them to take a giant step across the river, you decrease the amount of space between stepping stones. You move that stone much closer to where they are, and there's less of a threat where they feel like they're going to fall into the proverbial river, right? So you reduce the size of the commitment, hence micro-commitment. So in my world, what that might mean is instead of starting with name and email, I'm asking someone, first, tell me, are you a man or a woman? And the reason why I ask this question is because if this were like a weight loss market, men and women tend to suffer or struggle from different weight loss challenges. It's a simple, multiple choice question, right? That's what I call a softball question. It's easy to answer. You don't have to think about it. If I say, hey, are you a man or a woman? There's no cognitive higher level thinking going into it. It's just, you know that at a gut level. You don't even have to think about the answer. You're just clicking on man, right? But what it does is it builds what I describe as action-taking momentum. It gets people to take that first step. They dip their toe in the water in a non-threatening way. That fight or flight response, the limbic system, isn't even set off. If you were to do an MRI, if you were to do a PET scan on a person's brain, you're not going to see any activity in that part of their brain. You've literally hacked the limbic system. You've hacked that fight or flight response. So that's a little bit of the science, and that's a preview of, I know we're going to be talking about this in a little bit more detail at some point together. But that gives you a little bit of a foundation behind why there's scientific evidence that this is effective, and then we're going to be talking about, well, how does this play out in a marketing context? Does it actually play out like we might expect? Well, the 2.8 million leads, the 175,000 customers across all these different markets gives evidence that this is something that does have legs.
And now I'm curious, in business or in markets where men or women doesn't work, what kind of softball questions do you tend to use then?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It really depends on the context of things. So, for example, if it's a business question, you might say, are you primarily an online business or a brick and mortar business, right? A local business. Do you sell to customers? In just a single local market, or around the country or around the world? So you want to make it a question, and it depends on what your market might be. Do you sell digital products or physical products? And these might not be great examples because there's a little bit of blurred lines between them. A brick and mortar business might also have an online presence, right? Mm-hmm. But you want to ask a question that is, ideally, this first question is that, in that softball theme where it's so easy to answer, a person doesn't have to give any thought to it. And it's also not something that asks, implies a threatening request for sensitive information, right? And then the other thing, too, that I didn't bring up that's important is unless it's self-evident, you need to explain the rationale behind why you're asking that question, right? Are you a man or a woman? The reason why I ask is because otherwise it feels like, well, why are you asking me this question? But if you frame it that it's in their self-interest to answer that question accurately, the reason why I ask the question is because men and women suffer from different challenges, and if you tell me your gender, I can better match you up with the best solution for you. What's your response? Do you think, oh, that makes sense? Okay, cool.
No, I mean, most of the time, if you go to a website or you go to something like that, it's to your benefit. I mean, the same reason when you walk into a store and you're looking for clothing, you look up and you look for the women's sign or the men's sign, and you go to the section appropriately. It makes sense.
Right, right. It's no different. Like if we take this for granted in a face-to-face interaction, a face-to-face sales experience, right? It's very rare that someone you're going to walk, even the most poorly, like the worst question in retail, in the history of retail, is what? What's the worst question in the history of retail? If you were to, take a guess, what would you say?
I gotta say I'm drawing a blank on that one. I don't know. I never worked much retail.
Can I help you? Can I help you?
Figures that was actually
what's the response that we have been conditioned as even when we were kids listening to our parents respond to that question? No, thank you. I'm just looking. And what's crazy,
if you're asking a question for failure, you're probably going to get failure.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that people will even say no thanks even when they actually need help. How many times have you done this?
Yeah.
Can I help you with anything? No thanks, I'm just looking. No thanks, I'm all set. But really in the back of their mind, you're saying, you know what? It would be really helpful if you pointed me to where the gray athletic shorts are in size large because that's exactly what I'm looking for. But no, we respond no. So side tangent, but the point is, what wouldn't happen, what we never see offline, is walking into a retail store, and if we do see this, it's so awkward. You walk into a retail store, and it's, what's a store that I've been to? Hey, welcome to Finish Line. Here's here's the #1 athletic short that we've had, their bestseller, and it's 50% off. How would you like it right now? Just give me your contact information, and you'll get that doesn't happen, right? But that's what happens online. Instead, it's even the worst possible way to frame this question. May I help you? The question, may I help you? And then you say, actually, yes. Can you help me find blank? And then it starts a dialogue. Online, this just does not happen. So it just intuitively makes sense that if we translate that offline sales process of asking questions in a very specific way, translate it online, that it taps into an experience that we're all very familiar with and all very comfortable with. So that's the premise for this process. Now, I will say this, like most things in business, like most things in life, the devil's in the details. It's in the nuances of the psychology around how you frame the questions, the order in which you ask certain questions, the number of questions, how you use the demarcation, how you position the survey. So in other words, what you do before someone, what they see on the landing page before they're presented with the questions, how you use that information, how you use that information to customize your offer, how you use that information in your autoresponder sequence to segment people. The devil's in the details, and there's a lot of magic that can happen. But I hope this gives sort of like a sense for, I hope this gets people excited around what the possibilities are when you implement this correctly. Because there's a lot of potential, and it's something that can for me, it was the thing that I did this out of necessity because I was getting into markets where doing a one-size-fits-all positioning, I was failing. And almost on a whim, I decided to create different sales messages for different segments of the market, and that was the first major breakthrough that I had. That's what helped me crack the nut. And ever since I had that experience in that first market, that's exactly what I've done in market after market. I've just done it in a much more sophisticated, much more methodical way to the point that it's lather, rinse, repeat. And it's something that literally anybody can take my methodology and apply it and layer it on top of their business.
So now I'm curious. You're at this stage, right? So obviously now where you're at, the system's very successful. I'm sure it builds upon itself.
Yep.
But when you're at that mastermind, you had someone hand you a big pile of cash, you had your first quote unquote client for the system.
Yep.
How did you take it from there to the next level? Because just because you have the greatest thing in the world, you still have to convince people that it's the greatest thing in the world.
Are you asking from a client acquisition side of things, like how did I sell it, or?
Well, yeah, no, I'm just kind of curious with, how it grew in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's I spoke at a mastermind, and it was a mastermind where we were all sharing what we were doing, and I shared what I was doing in one of my markets, and it was one of those moments where you could hear a pin drop in the room because people were just blown away with what I had done, and it was one of these things where people in the room recognized and said, "I get it. It totally makes sense. It's survey segmentation. It makes perfect sense, but I, how do you actually do it? It's one thing. It's sort of like taking the theoretical idea down to the practical sense. And I just said, well, to be perfectly honest, this is the only way that I know how to succeed online, and so I've done this out of necessity. I've repeated it 3 times, and the model is, at the time, my business model was I was going to do it in 20 different markets. I was going to have 20 $500,000 businesses in different niches, and I would have collectively a $10 million business. And that was the path that I was on. As I was just moving down that path, and it was just about knocking out one of these businesses. And really, it was about a year process to take me from nothing to $500,000 at this point. I'd refined the process somewhat, but that's still, you do the math, 20 markets, a year each at $500,000. That's still like a 20-year process to get to $10 million. And for me, it was attractive to work with a business that was already at $20 or $50 million, and helping them get to from $20 to $30 million, for example, using this methodology was a hell of a lot faster for me than to take something from ground zero. So that's the reason why I decided to go down that path. The trade-off, of course, is less freedom. When you're running your own business and you're taking something yourself from ground zero, you have no boss. You have nobody that you need to answer to. So it's really just a matter of what's more important to you. For me, I love the freedom of being able to. We lived in Asia. We lived, in the United States. We could travel, live anywhere in the world that we wanted to. Nobody to answer to. Could take a month off if we wanted to, and that was very appealing. But for me, I was really interested in, will this translate to the next market? We had success in that first market, and really from there, it's just, in all honesty, I'm a marketing guy that does no marketing on the private client side of our business. Every single client that's come to me has been a private referral. It's really just been a case of, oh my God, I can't believe what you've done. Let me tell my buddy about you and what you've done for us, and that's led to another business, another business, another business.
There's nothing wrong with a product so good that everyone wants to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the phone with Paris Lampropoulos the other day, and Paris, for folks who are not familiar, he's regarded as one of the best copywriters alive today for direct mail, direct response. And we joked, and he said, I said, the one criticism people say, they say, hey, Ryan, how come you're not using a survey funnel for your marketing practice? And I tell people, why would you build a survey funnel if you have more business than you can actually handle? And Paris's response was, I totally get it. I'm a copywriter with an unlisted phone number, with an unlisted address, but my phone rings off the hook. And when you're in that position, it's, why would you do any marketing? So, the curse of success is really too many opportunities to take advantage of that you can't say yes to everything. That's one of the reasons why I decided to teach this methodology, is because you only have 168 hours in a week. I can't work in all the markets that I'd like to work in. I can't work with all the people that I'd like to work with. So the next best thing is to teach it. And for me, the big mission that I'm on, and this is truly a mission, is I have this vision that 10 years from now, what we're talking about today as being cutting edge and unique and different, 9 out of 10 websites are going to start with what we just talked about. Instead of jamming down someone's throat, here's why we're the best, it's going to be commonplace for a website to say, let me time out a second. Let me see if we can help you. All you need to do is answer a few simple questions. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because it benefits the customer, because it helps more people out. And by extension, it helps out merchants because when you're helping out more customers, you're going to be more successful. So it really is a rising tide raises all ships, and everybody wins. And to be part of that process for me is really what energizes me. When you get to a point where the money is just kind of a scorecard, you've bought everything that you could ever want to buy. You have the lifestyle that you want. Living exactly what you want. Really, it's the mission that drives me personally to to continue doing this. So hopefully that provides a little bit of context around kind of where we are.
No, and it does, and it's funny because I actually like that you addressed the question without me even asking it of, hey, why don't you do this for yourself? But what I'm attracted to by you, pause, is you say there's a balance, between your implementation and your training, and so often it's 80-20 the other way. It's all training, and they kind of maybe do it.
Right.
And that's where I find it to be a bigger issue. So with you, it's the exact opposite. It's like, what does it matter if you're doing it for yourself? You're doing it for other people. You're having results with it. I mean, the best personal trainers in the world aren't always in the best shape. That's not really the point. The point is they get their clients results. That's what people are looking for. They use the system, and the system gets results.
Well, what I realized for me, why don't you just do this for yourself? And that's a great question. And it's a question that I kind of reconsider really almost every quarter. Why don't I just get rid of all my clients and just build my own business? Well, what I've recognized, and this is unique to me, but I'll answer the question. You didn't ask it directly, but I think it's an important question to bring up. There are a lot of things, because I've gone down this path. I've built, mid-six-figure businesses from the ground up. There are a lot of things about that I personally am not very good at and don't like. I'll give you a perfect example. I don't like building products. I'm one of these people. I do not like creating products. I just don't, and I don't know what it is. I know what happens. It's my academic perfectionist tendencies tend to take over, and I get so OCD and anal about all these little details, whereas when I'm in a marketing context, that doesn't happen. I love to sell, and I'm very, very good at it. I'm not very good at managing vendors. I don't like supply chain. I don't like having to have, one supplier supplying DVD cases, another for labels, another with printing, working with a fulfillment house to put everything all together. I don't like that side of the business. I'd much rather have someone who's good at operations do that. And so for me, doing this for clients allows me to do what I'm very, very good at over and over again, and only that one thing. So it's sort of a way to almost have our cake and eat it too. At the same time, the way I'm compensated, most people might not know this, I get paid a very high fee plus a piece of the action. So I'm not doing this just for a fee. I get paid a percentage of all the revenue that's brought in through my work. So in many ways, it operates more like a partnership when I work with someone than just a client-vendor relationship.
And I know time-wise we're about to get pressed here, so I would kind of be interested real quick to hear
Sure.
how you go about establishing that and actually getting that percentage and making that work, because I know that's one thing that can be an issue with any of these kind of client service-based businesses.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, at first and foremost, what's number one most important is deciding who you're going to do business with. Full stop. So in other words, you need to trust who you're going into business with. That matters more than anything else. Now, it's nice to have a piece of paper that spells out an agreement in detail, and I've invested a lot of time and money with attorneys to build an agreement that spells out everything in detail. But for anybody who's going down this path, a few of the key things that you want to have, make sure everybody's on the same page in terms of reporting metrics. So what data do you have access to? What data does the client have access to? How is that shared? Make sure that there's a common level of understanding on how that'll be shared. In my case, clients are willing and very happy to provide me with data because, number one, I'm very discreet. People know that about me. And you'll notice that when I speak publicly about what I do, I never compromise a specific client's results. I'll never compromise even a specific client's name if it's not appropriate. So I'm very discreet, and clients trust me, and that trust is paramount, tantamount to everything else. So I'd say that's, you build that trust over time, and that comes with reputation. So that's the first thing. People know you're not going to divulge information. You're not going to post, hey, look at my numbers that I got, in this client's dashboard on the Warrior Forum or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Second thing that is very important is, with respect to that one thing, is there's a reason why it's beneficial to the client to give me access to numbers, right? And the reason why is because the game doesn't end when the funnel's built. That's when the game begins. The funnel's built, then it's all about testing, optimizing, tweaking, split testing, making changes, and the only way that you can test and tweak yourself to your way to success is by having access to the data. So it's in a client's best interest to share things like that.
And
so, yeah.
Ryan, real quick before you go, I know we are going to have the pleasure of having a webinar with you where you're going to talk specifically about, the survey funnel formula more in depth. Can you kind of give us maybe a 2-minute or 60-second rundown of what you're going to kind of cover on that and why people should attend?
Absolutely. So the reason why it's called the survey funnel formula, and we touched on one of the surveys, is what makes this, and there are a lot of people who talk about building sales funnels, marketing funnels. So what's the question is, what makes this unique? What makes this different? Well, what makes it different is that there are 4 specific surveys that are used at strategic points in the sales funnel. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing what those specific surveys are, the role they play, and I'm going to walk through actual real-life case studies showing the type of results that each of those surveys were responsible for in a couple different scenarios. So we're going to be covering that in detail. It's the type of webinar that you're going to want to have a pen and paper out to take a lot of detailed notes. I'm going to be showing you some things that you can actually use. I'm going to be going through actual emails that I send out. You're going to want to be taking screenshots of the screen so you can get the copy that I use verbatim. It's that type of webinar that you're going to walk away with very detailed, tactical, actionable things that you can apply in your business immediately after we finish up. So I'm really excited to do this. I'm passionate about this. I love teaching. It's the academic in me. I love teaching. I love sharing. And I'm really excited to be sharing this with your audience when we have a chance to do this.
Definitely. And I appreciate it a lot for you to jump on the podcast beforehand. I definitely appreciate it. Everyone, all the listeners, of course, I will have a link edited in. If you check out the podcast, I'll have a link for you guys to webinar and a link to the webinar for you guys to sign up. Very easy and smooth, like you would check out any of the other podcasts and interviews in the blog post. So once again, Ryan, I know you have to run. You're a busy man, and I respect that. I respect the packed schedule. And thanks a lot again for coming on and kind of sharing this with us. And I honestly do look forward to this upcoming webinar. I just learned a ton about funnels, and funnels have always interested me, so I'm excited.
Awesome, Sweeney. Thank you so much for having me. I'm pumped as well, and we're going to have some fun.
Sounds good, man. Have a good one, and good luck later.
You too, man. Take care.